The argument had started before they even left the driveway. Brenna had made the mistake of sitting down to breakfast. That was all. She had come downstairs at 7 in the morning in her own father's house, poured herself a cup of coffee, and made the second mistake of the morning, which was being in the room when Jacob Day walked in wearing the face he wore when he had already decided something. She knew that face. She had been reading it her whole life the way children learn to read weather, not because anyone taught them, but because survival requires it. The set of his jaw. The particular stillness of his eyes, like water just before it freezes. She had learned to leave rooms when she saw that face. She had learned to become invisible, to become furniture, to take up no space, make no sound, require nothing. But she had heard the phone call. That was the problem. That was the entire architecture of the disaster unfolding now, in the front seat of his black Lincoln Continental, moving down a 4-lane stretch of road south of Buckhead at 40 miles an hour, both of them facing forward like strangers on a train, except that her father's voice had dropped to the register he reserved for things he intended to be the last word on. "You don't know what you heard," Jacob said. "I know exactly what I heard," Brenna said, and the moment the words left her mouth she felt the air in the car change, felt it pressurize the way a room does before something breaks. But she was 23 years old and she had been swallowing things her entire life, and the list of names she had heard her father recite in that study, police names, city names, a logistics company called Meridian, numbers that had made her stomach drop, had been sitting in her chest for 36 hours like a coal she couldn't put down, and she was done. Brenna. A warning. The first and last kind he gave. "Deputy Commissioner Webb," she said. "Councilman Pitts. Meridian Cold Storage on I-85, first and third Friday, 412,000, recurring. Daddy, I wasn't half asleep. I was standing in the hallway and the study door was open and you were on speakerphone and I heard." "Stop." Her father's voice interrupted harshly. Brenna didn't listen to him as she went in every single word, "And I don't know exactly what you're moving through that corridor, but I know it's not legal. I know people are getting paid to look the other way, and I know that whatever it is has been going on long enough that you've memorized the schedule." I said stop. Her father's voice boomed again. But Brenna went on, "And I'm not going to pretend I didn't hear it. I'm not going to sit in that house and act like." She never finished the sentence. What happened next took less than 3 seconds, and her mind would spend a long time afterward refusing to accept the sequence because it happened too fast for the brain to file it cleanly. Her father's right hand left the steering wheel. It crossed the center console with a speed that had nothing casual in it, the speed of a man who has rehearsed this moment even if he never knew it, and his fingers found the door handle on her side. The electronic click of the lock disengaging was the most ordinary sound she'd ever heard. It was the sound of every arrival, every errand, every Sunday after church her whole life. The door swung open to 40 miles per hour of Atlanta morning. She turned toward it instinctively, the body's confusion, reaching for the thing that had moved, and in that half second of turning, Jacob's foot left the brake and found her. One hard, flat kick to her left side, her hip and lower back catching the full force of it, and there was nothing to hold, no handle, no seat, no ground, just the open door and the rushing air and then the road. She didn't fall. She was expelled, a word she'd reach for later because nothing softer was accurate. Her body left the car the way something leaves a hand that has simply opened, and then the asphalt found her. Her right shoulder hit first. The impact ripped through her like voltage, a white crack of pain so total it wasn't pain yet, just force, and then she was rolling, the world cycling through sky and road and the undercarriage of a vehicle that missed her by inches, and she couldn't count the rotations because her brain had stopped counting things and started simply surviving them. The second impact when her head caught the road, the side of her skull against the asphalt in a collision that detonated behind her eyes in a flash of total white, her body finally stopping against the double yellow line like something discarded from height. Then stillness. The specific, ringing stillness of a body that has been through something enormous and is now performing a rapid audit of what remains. She was on her back. The Georgia sky was the color of a bruise forming, overcast and enormous. A horn was going somewhere. Multiple horns. The shriek of brakes. Voices rising in that specific pitch of a crowd that has witnessed something and does not know what to do with the witnessing. She tried to move. Her right arm responded poorly. Her left didn't respond at all, or rather, it responded with a blinding white message she interpreted as "do not try that again." Her head was wrong. The sky above her was doing something it shouldn't, a slow, sickening rotation, and she understood through the spinning that she had hit it hard, that the asphalt had hit it back harder, and that remaining conscious was now a project that required her full attention. Don't close your eyes, she told herself. Don't you close your eyes on Peachtree Street. She turned her head, slowly, at enormous cost. The Lincoln Continental was 200 yards ahead. Brake lights on. She actually thought. For one wrecked second, he stopped. He's coming back. The light turned green. He drove. Around her, Atlanta arranged itself into the performance of concern. Feet on the curb. Phones out. Someone repeating "oh my God" as though volume would make it useful. The bus that had braked 10 feet from her head was beginning to inch forward, its driver with a schedule and a liability and no good options. She was in 4 lanes of Thursday morning traffic, her left arm broken in at least one place she could identify, her head leaking something warm into her braids, and the world was doing a slow, terrible spin that told her the hit to her skull was not a minor thing. She could not stand. She was not sure she could crawl. She pressed her right palm to the asphalt and the asphalt pressed back and the spinning got worse and she thought, with perfect clarity, I am going to lose consciousness on this road. She heard a car pulling to a screeching loud halt, but she couldn't not see it. Everything was a blur. Her head was banging and her eyes were closing, her consciousness slipping away. Then she heard footsteps. Not tentative ones. Not the shuffling approach of a bystander managing their own fear. These were footsteps that moved like they owned the ground they crossed, even ground that wasn't theirs, and they came fast and stopped when they reached her. She looked up. The world was spinning but she found his face in it and held on. The man crouching over her was Korean, mid-30s, in a charcoal suit that had not been purchased anywhere Brenner had ever shopped. His face was still in the way that expensive things are still, composed, arranged, a room where nothing is out of place because nothing is left to chance. He was scanning her with dark eyes that were doing fast, deliberate work, her arm, her face, the blood she could feel moving from her hairline, the angle of her neck. Behind him were 2 armed-bodied men, flanking each of his sides. Then he looked in the direction of the Lincoln Continental. Gone. He noted its absence the way a man notes something he intends to revisit. He looked back at her. Don't move your neck, he said. I wasn't planning to, she said, which cost her a lot. His hands found her, careful, checking, and she heard him exhale through his nose, the breath of a man confirming something he didn't want to confirm. He said something in Korean, low and sharp, directed behind him. Footsteps behind her, more of them, and then he slid one arm beneath her knees and the other behind her shoulders, keeping her spine aligned with the focused care of someone who knew exactly why that mattered, and lifted. The world lurched. The spinning intensified. She grabbed something and found the lapel of his jacket and held it. I don't know you, she said. No, he said, moving toward the car. Why are you saving me? Please don't kidnap me, I'm really too weak to fight. And I'm of no use to you. I feel like I'm dying. I could be anyone, why are you saving me? He would let her talk on and on if that meant she wouldn't close her eyes. You're someone who was just kicked out of a moving vehicle, he said. Sort the rest out later. He placed her across the back seat with a slowness that was itself a kind of protection, one hand bracing her head until it found the folded jacket he'd placed there before she could even track the motion. She was horizontal. The roof of the SUV was above her. The door closed and the car was cool and quiet and she could hear her own pulse in her skull like a second conversation, low and insistent. She has a head injury. The man who had saved her was now in the passenger seat, speaking with someone. Not to her. To someone on a phone. Arm, left, upper. Possible concussion. She was down for, he glanced back at her. How long were you unconscious? I wasn't, she said. How long were you on the road? She thought. The thinking was harder than it should have been. I don't know. A few minutes. He returned to the phone. She stared at the roof and breathed and tried to keep the world from spinning and thought, I should be more afraid than I am. She thought, my father kicked me out of a moving car like I was something he'd decided was already gone. She thought, my head is bleeding into a stranger's jacket and I don't know where I'm going and I should be screaming. She wasn't screaming. She was watching the man in the front seat in the angle of the mirror, the clean line of his profile, the way he looked straight ahead, unhurried, as though what he'd just done was not remarkable. She was thinking about the way he had braced her head. That had not been the motion of a man performing rescue. That was the motion of a man who knew what he was doing, who had assessed her injuries in under 30 seconds in the middle of Peachtree Street, who had carried her off a road not quickly but correctly. The spinning was getting worse. She pressed her right hand flat against the seat to give the world something to anchor to. "Hey," he said, from the front. She realized he turned, and was watching her in the mirror. "Stay awake." "I'm awake," she said. "Keep talking." "About what?" "Anything." She looked at the roof. "I was pre-law," she said. "Before the money ran out." A pause. "I hate that I remember that right now." "Why?" "Because it feels like something a person thinks before they die." "You're not dying," he said. Flat and too corrective. As though dying were simply an inaccurate assessment she'd made. She almost smiled. Her head pulsed. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen people dying," he said. "You're talking too much." "You told me to keep talking." A pause. "Fair," he said. She closed her eyes for 1 second. The car moved. Atlanta moved in the windows. The last thing she held onto before the dark finally got what it had been reaching for was his voice, still in the front seat, saying something in Korean on a phone, low and certain, the voice of a man managing a situation he has decided is now his to manage. She was about to say something, but before she could, the darkness wrapped itself around her and pulled her into a deep slumber. Brenna wasn't sure how long she was unconscious, but when she woke up she noticed that everything around her was different. The ceiling was not one she owned. That was her first thought on waking. The ceiling was high and white and without cracks, and the room it belonged to was considered in the way that certain rooms are not decorated, composed, the way a sentence is composed, each element knowing its function. A window with white curtains. A magnolia in the garden below, heavy with late-season blooms. And on the nightstand there was water, medication. Eat before the 2 pills. Someone comes at 8. No name. She didn't need one. She could vividly remember the events that happened before she lost consciousness. She did an inventory of herself the way she used to inventory her father's moods, methodically, without self-pity, just information. Left arm in a sling, cast from just below the shoulder to the wrist, broken in one place, fractured in another, which the quiet doctor had explained to her at some point in the night in words that reached her through a fog. 3 ribs on her left side, taped, cracked, not broken through, which was apparently the better version of a bad thing. The left side of her face was dressed and swollen, road rash from cheekbone to jaw, cleaned of gravel and blood. Her head was the worst of it. A mild concussion, the doctor had said, with the tone of someone who wanted her to understand that mild was doing significant work in that sentence. No fracture, the scan confirmed. But the headache behind her eyes was a living thing, a dull, persistent pressure that spiked when she moved too quickly, and she had been instructed, with quiet firmness, not to move too quickly. She was wearing clothes that weren't hers, soft grey, loose, a house that stocked guest things with sufficiency and no sentiment. Outside the window the magnolia stood in morning light, enormous and still. At 8, a woman named Minute He arrived, assessed her in 3 questions and a blood pressure cuff, and adjusted her pain medication with the efficiency of someone who respected both precision and time. Brenna ate the food that came after. Then she sat against the headboard and watched the garden, and because she had nothing to do but think, and because thinking was harder than usual with the concussion pressing its thumb behind her eyes, she did it slowly and carefully. She thought about the sequence in the car. The click of the lock. The door swinging open. The specific violence of a foot applied to her hip with intent. She ran it forward and backward and sideways until it stopped being something that had happened to her and started being something she could hold at arm's length and examine. Her father had not argued, had not threatened, had not made conditions. He had simply removed her. The way you remove a variable from an equation that's been bothering you. She understood, fully, what that meant about what she had overheard. She thought about what she knew, the names, the schedule, the numbers, the geography of a corruption so embedded in the city it had its own calendar. She thought about what that information was worth. She thought about the man whose jacket was likely ruined by her blood. On the second day, she asked Minute He about him. Minute He's expression arranged itself into practiced neutrality. "Mr. Park will come when you're ready." "What if I'm ready now?" "He'll see you tomorrow." He came on the 3rd day. She was sitting up, tracking the security rotation through the window. He stood in the doorway in a white shirt, collar open, and regarded her the way he had in the road, with the detached attention of a man reading a document he finds more interesting than expected. "You're watching the camera angles," he said. I've been awake for 2 days, she said. I ran out of other things to do. His eyes moved to her arm. The cast. The dressed side of her face. Something moved through his expression, brief and controlled. How's your head? He asked. Like someone used it to test the asphalt on Peachtree Street. The doctor says a week. No screens, no stress. The doctor isn't in my situation. No, he agreed. He crossed to the chair by the window and sat with the ease of a man who owned the chair, the room, and most of the surrounding decisions. Tell me what happened. Her eyes held his for a moment, and for the briefest second, she took time to let her eyes wander across him. This was the man who saved her. If perhaps she wasn't feeling pain all over her body, perhaps her mouth would have dropped, because he looked like someone God took his time sculpting. She told him. All of it, the breakfast, the car, everything she'd said and everything that had been said back. And before the car, the study door 3 inches open, her father on speakerphone, the names and numbers and schedules she had memorized the way you memorize things that frighten you. She watched him listen. He was very good at listening. He didn't perform it, he simply did it, with the whole weight of his attention. And the first question he asked was what her father's name was. And who was he? When she finished, the room sat with what she'd said. Jacob Day, he said. Not a question. Was, she said. She'd had 3 days to choose that word. He thinks you're dead. Yes. That's useful. What's your name? She suddenly asked. His eyes squinted at her. What makes you think I'll give you my name when you've not given yours? She sighed. My name is Brenner. Brenner Days. The man nodded slowly before speaking out. Christian Park. He looked at her. She looked back. The quiet between them settled like something that had been looking for a place to land. You can have the run of the house, he said, standing. Don't leave the property. Don't use the East Hall phones. Don't discuss what you just told me with anyone here. And what am I? She asked. In terms of how you're thinking about this. He paused at the door. Alive, he said. That's enough to start with. He left. Brenner turned back to the magnolia and thought, he knows my father's name. Not as a stranger's name. As something already filed. Which meant Jacob Day's operation on I-85 was not invisible to a man who ran logistics through this city. Which meant she had not landed in this house by pure accident. Or if she had, the accident had become something else the moment she'd opened her mouth. She was not naive. She catalogued what she was inside, a house belonging to a powerful and dangerous man who now held information about her father through her, and who had pulled her off a road for reasons she didn't fully know yet. She could be afraid of this. She had all the material for fear. Instead she picked up the water glass with her right hand, drank, set it down, and began to think about how to make herself something other than a liability to a man like Christian Park. Because liabilities got managed. And she was done being managed. Christian allowed her to stay in his home. She barely encountered him on any days, but Minhee was always there anytime she needed her. And slowly, Brenner came to understand who Christian Park was, every single thing about him. Enough to know and understand that the man must either know her father a little too well, or had someone else who does. Brenner had somehow gotten used to the nooks and crannies of the house. And on the 10th day, despite the residual headache duller now, more weather than storm, she walked into his office without knocking. He looked up from his desk. The lens adjustment. 1 degree sharper. Meridian cold storage, she said. My father has been running operations through your logistics network on I-85 for at least 14 months. Using your infrastructure, your corridor, without authorization and paying off city contacts with the revenue. Contacts who I'm guessing were originally in your network. She stopped in front of the desk. He's been cutting you out and using your own bridges to do it. Which means whatever you do to him, you're not collecting a debt. You're reclaiming territory that was taken from you. Silence. Christian set down his pen. 10 days, he said. With a concussion. The headache slowed me down for 2 days. The other 8 were fine. That 1-inch door. Sit down. I'll stand. He looked at her for a moment that was its own kind of conversation. Then, what do you want? She had prepared this. Premise, evidence, ask, terms. I want him to know I'm alive, she said. I want to be in the room when he finds out. I want the consequences to come from the information I carry, legal consequences, the kind that stick, the kind that come from a federal record and not from a body in the Chattahoochee. I want to walk out clean on the other side, my name unattached to whatever you do with your half of this. She held his gaze. And I want us to do this as aligned parties, not as, she paused, looking for the exact word, patron and rescued. The quiet again. The charged kind. The legal piece is yours, he said. The structural piece, his network, his corridor, his contacts, that's mine. The clean exit, he picked up his pen. That I'll protect. Why? She asked. He looked at her for a moment longer than necessary. Because you walked into my office, he said. 10 days out of a road with a broken arm and a concussion, and you walked in and laid it out like a brief. He paused. Most people don't do that. She didn't know what to do with that, so she filed it carefully. Then we have an arrangement, she said. The beginning of one, he said. Tomorrow, come find me at 9. I want to take you somewhere. She paused at the door. You don't have to do that. I know, he said. He was looking at his desk when he said it. Not at anything on it. The somewhere was a rooftop in Midtown. No staff. The city spread out in every direction, towers and old neighborhoods and the long green corridor of Piedmont Park, Atlanta going about itself with total indifference to the two people standing above it. He brought coffee. Good coffee, which she noted, because the details of a person's ordinary choices tell you more than their curated ones. He stood at the railing and said nothing for a while. She stood beside him, close, not touching, in the particular proximity of two people pretending the proximity is incidental, and watched the city breathe. Her head was mostly better. The cast on her arm was the more present reminder now, a constant peripheral weight. She'd gotten used to it the way you get used to evidence, you stop noticing it until you do, and then it tells you everything. You grew up here, he said. Not a question, he knew things. Southwest Atlanta. Then Buckhead when my father's money got right. She paused. You. Soul. Then here. He drank his coffee. 13 years. Do you like it? He was quiet for a moment. A real pause, not the managed kind. It reminds me of something I can't name, he said. I think that might be what liking a place actually is. She looked at him sideways. There was something different about him up here. Less composed, not softer, less arranged. Like the gap between a written document and its author. You came into traffic for a stranger, she said. 4 lanes. Thursday morning. Yes. Why? He turned his coffee cup once, slowly, in his hand. She had started to recognize this as a tell, the only one he had, that she'd found the gesture of a man deciding how much of a true thing to say. You looked at me, he said finally. On the road. You were barely conscious and you looked at me like you were deciding whether I was worth trusting. He paused. No one looks at me like that. They look at me like they've already decided. She understood what he meant. She had seen it, the way his men moved around him, the way visitors arranged themselves, the anticipatory quality of every room he entered. He was a man people had already concluded things about before he spoke. Were you, she asked, worth trusting? He looked at her. Direct, unhurried, the full weight of his attention. I'm still deciding, he said. Whether I deserve that question. The honesty of it caught her. He didn't perform vulnerability, he didn't have the habit of it, she could see that, but when something true surfaced in him it came up clean, without decoration, and it was more disarming than anything rehearsed could have been. She looked back at the city. I used to think my father was the most powerful man I knew, she said. I organized my whole personality around not threatening that. A pause. It turns out the most powerful men I'd seen were just the loudest ones. They performed it constantly because they needed the audience. She glanced at him. You're not like that. No, he agreed, without vanity. That's more frightening, actually. I know, he said. I'm sorry. She laughed. Genuinely, from somewhere it surprised her, the concussion had made her emotions unpredictably close to the surface and the laugh came up before she could manage it, and she put her hand over her mouth and he turned to look at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before, unguarded, startled, pleased. Like a man who had forgotten what it felt like to say something that landed as funny rather than significant. Don't apologize, she said. It's the most human thing you've said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked back at the city, but the expression stayed, that small, unguarded warmth, sitting on his face like morning light on a room that's usually closed. They stood there a long time. The city moved below. Their arms were 3 inches apart on the railing and stayed that way, neither of them closing the distance, neither of them moving away, which was its own kind of answer to a question neither had asked yet. Jacob Day was having an excellent quarter. The zoning amendment had passed. 2 investigations had dissolved. His name was appearing in rooms where names became invitations, and he moved through the city with the ease of a man who had made peace with the mathematics of how power is maintained. He had filed his daughter under loss, not without feeling. He had a different filing system for feeling than most, and moved forward. The ledger was clean. The momentum was good. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Courier service he didn't recognize. Inside, a single card. And the handwriting on it, clean, looping, hit him the way the body knows things before the mind permits them. You left something on Peachtree Street. I'd like to return it. He sat very still for a long time. He called Harlan Webb. Unanswered. Called Jerome Pitts. Pitts answered, but his voice had a structural thinness to it, something load-bearing recently removed. Not on this line, he said. Not today. Within 48 hours Jacob understood that something had been circulating. Documents. Records. The full architecture of his arrangement with the city, detailed in a way that only someone who had stood close to his silences could have assembled. It was moving through federal channels. It had been submitted by a named witness, a witness he had, with his own foot, removed from the equation. He had made one miscalculation. He had believed that what he threw away would stay thrown. The meeting was Christian's choice, a private room in Buckhead. Brenma's cast was off. 3 weeks, the break had been clean and the fracture had followed. Her face had healed without scarring, though the skin on her left cheekbone was still newer looking than the rest, a subtle difference she noticed in certain lights. The headaches were gone. What remained was not injury but memory, the particular bodily knowledge of a person who has been through something and been remade by the going through. She wore black. She had come with nothing deliberately, because she had learned from watching Christian that what you don't carry into a room says as much as what you bring. Jacob arrived with 2 men who were invited, wordlessly, to remain outside. He walked in and found his daughter at the table and stopped in the center of the room, and his face did the thing faces do when they encounter something they have decided is finished. It lost its composure before it could locate a replacement. 1 unguarded second. Underneath everything he had built over decades, the confidence, the construction, the absolute assurance of a man accustomed to determining outcomes, there was just a man looking at what he had done. Christian was at the far end of the table. Still as structure. Jacob Saturday. He looked at his daughter. He looked at the man at the end of the table whose name had been arriving in uncomfortable contexts for 2 weeks. Brenna, he said. Her name in his mouth like something mispronounced. Don't, she said. The word was a door she had been building for weeks. She closed it now without ceremony. She placed the folder on the table. She had organized it herself. 14 months of documentation, financial transfers, schedules, names, and badge numbers and correspondence laid out with the architecture of a legal brief, because she had spent 3 weeks thinking like a lawyer while living in a house that had taught her how power actually moved. Federal investigators received this 3 days ago, she said. I submitted it as a witness. A witness who was silenced, she let a beat pass. Or was supposed to be. She watched his face. Webb resigned this morning. Pitts is negotiating. The others will follow because that's what men like them do when the structure fails, they negotiate. She folded her hands on the table. Your network is closed, Daddy. The corridor is gone. The contacts are gone. Everything you built on borrowed infrastructure, on a network that wasn't yours, it's gone. Jacob looked at Christian. You orchestrated this. She did, Christian said. It was the first time he'd spoken. I made sure she was alive to do it. The distinction landed in the room with the finality of a verdict. Jacob looked at his daughter. Something moved in his face that had too many ingredients to be named cleanly: anger, the residue of fear, and buried beneath everything he'd stacked on top of it over 23 years, something that might once have been the idea of love, before he'd converted it into currency and spent it. You'll regret this, he said. The last brick of the last wall. No, she said. Without heat. Without performance. The way you correct a factual error. I spent 23 years in your house making myself smaller so you'd have more room. Learning your silences. Reading your moods. I memorized every version of your face so I could navigate around you, and I told myself that was love, that being that careful of a person was how daughters show love. She paused. You opened a car door and kicked me out of it going 40 miles an hour. And the only thing I'm grateful for, truly grateful, is that the road was there to catch me, because you weren't going to. The room was very quiet. Jacob stood. Straightened his jacket. He looked at his daughter for a long moment and she met it, all of it, without flinching or softening, and when he finally looked away it was not because she had broken but because he had. He left. The door closed. The footsteps descended and were absorbed by the restaurant below, and then there was only Buckhead afternoon and the particular silence of a room where something has been completed. Brenna sat still. Then she let out a breath that had been in her body since Thursday morning on Peachtree Street, the breath underneath all the other breaths, the one she'd been holding through asphalt and cast and concussion and 10 days of thinking and one rooftop and all the slow accumulation of who she'd been becoming while her body put itself back together. Christian poured 2 glasses of water and slid one across to her. She took it. How do you feel? He asked. She thought about it honestly. Like myself, she said. For the first time in a very long time, exactly like myself. He was watching her. Not the assessment from the road, not the professional attention of the office, something else, something that had been building in the peripheral of every conversation since a rooftop in Midtown, present now without the pretense of incidental. What do you do now? He asked. Law school, she said. I finish it this time. All of it. She looked at her hands, the right one bare, the left one free of its cast for a week now, still faintly marked at the wrist where the plaster had ended. I know how this city works now. How money becomes policy and policy becomes permission and permission becomes, she gestured toward the door, that. I want to know how to dismantle it from inside. Properly. Legally. Permanently. You'd be good at it, he said. I know, she said, and it was not arrogance, it was the particular confidence of a person who has stopped waiting to be told who they are. A quiet came between them. The kind she'd gotten used to. His silences had a quality she'd spent weeks learning to read, and what she was reading now was a man with more in him than he was releasing, which was almost always true of Christian Park, but the nature of the surplus had shifted, it was not strategic now, it was personal. And personal was the thing she'd been watching move toward the surface of him like light through deep water. You can stay, he said. In the house. Until you're a pause. There's no timeline. It's an open offer. She looked at him. He was looking at his water glass. Turning it once in that way he had, the only tell he'd never corrected. She had spent enough time in his orbit to understand what it meant when Christian Park said a direct thing sideways. It meant the direct version mattered more to him than most things, and he was deciding how much of it to trust the room with. She decided to trust the room. I'll stay, she said. And not because I need a place. He looked up. Because I'd like to, she said. If that's a distinction you're making. The 1-inch door open. Not all the way. But open enough to see that what was on the other side of it was warm and real, and had been waiting there with the patience of a man who does not rush things he wants to keep. It is, he said. The distinction. She reached across the table and set her hand over his. She hadn't planned it. But she had learned, in the past weeks, that planning was for the things that mattered less, and this quiet table, this city in the windows, this man who had walked into traffic and caught her fall and then, slowly, carefully, learned her, this mattered. His hand was still for one beat. The practiced stillness of a man who manages his reactions. Then, slowly, it turned beneath hers and held on. The next noon, they went out again, clearly for nothing very important except they wanted to simply share moments with themselves. Christian Park was interested in her and he wasn't hiding it in any way. They sat together while Atlanta moved below the window, the city going about its long life, indifferent to the 2 people above it who were figuring out, with no urgency and no audience, the particular geography of what came next. Outside, Peachtree ran in both directions as it always had. Somewhere on I-85, a corridor was being closed by people with federal authority and the right paperwork. Somewhere in this city, a man who had opened a car door and used his foot was learning, very slowly, what it cost to miscalculate what he'd thrown away. And here, in a room above all of it, Brenna, not her father's daughter anymore, not the girl from the road, not the sum of what had been done to her, held the hand of a man who had come for her when the city hadn't, and thought. Survival was the first sentence. This is the second one. She intended to read every single word. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more thrilling stories.